Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is James, who has what used to be called an intersex condition, or basically a disorder of sexual development, or DSD. And in this conversation, we talk about his development and how his body didn't go through puberty, and then how the medical industry assisted him in going through puberty and still assists him with regard to producing androgen. Well, not producing androgen, but he needs to take supplemental hormone replacement therapy because his body doesn't produce it naturally. So we talk about his condition, but we also talk about the appropriation of DSDs or intersex conditions by the gender queer lobby to forward this notion that there's a spectrum of sex and that a child can opt into puberty, when in fact puberty is a necessary step in brain development, bone development, body development, psychological development, and so on. And James' contention is that transitioning children, if that's the correct word, is a human rights violation. Wonderful, informative conversation. Definitely check out James' videos and his Twitter account, which are linked down there in the description. Without further ado, here is James. How's it going?
Oh, good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining me.
Yes.
Who are we going to piss off now?
Oh, yeah, I've been trying not to get in too many fights, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So
I can't help myself.
It's not that kind of thing then.
No,
Okay.
no, it's not. It's not that kind of thing.
Because it was kind of
I'm trying
epic the first time.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. It's I'm a kind of a troublemaker, and it's the only thing I seem to do well. So, I mean, really, if my employer had a troublemaking, they'd be like, "Oh yes, that's a 10." So, anyway.
Can I ask what industry you're in? Just like
I do consulting. Okay. Right now I'm consulting some AI stuff because people are really clueless about all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I'm able to.
Are you an expert at AI?
I don't know if I'm an expert at AI. I can advise you on how to implement large language models on your server.
Okay.
And what large language models you can use and why you would want to use them.
Yeah.
I can also tell you how to get around some of the censorship issues and other things. Okay. So, yeah. Because they're very quirky, and a lot of the information online is in the news is kind of wrong. They've got this whole thing kind of, they don't quite understand what large language models actually do, and
it's not partially. I think it has to do with the way that it's marketed. This is marketed as artificial intelligence. A large language model it's not sticky enough. Human beings, we think if we assign intent to things that don't necessarily have intent, right? So we're trying to anthropomorphize this thing. And so disentangling this large language model from AI, from something that's sentient or sentient-ish, is, I guess, the first step, right?
Yeah, they're not sentient at all. I mean, there's this whole thing about him, this guy, talking to this thing, saying he's trying to talk himself out of, his wife or something. But it's talking to AI, and the AI started talking about, you should leave your wife. And and they said, well, no, this large language model is trying to convince him to leave his wife. It's sentient, right? But if you look earlier in the conversation, he asked the AI, what does Jungian mean by a dark shadow self? Mm-hmm. And the AI went back and said, oh, do you want me to pretend like I'm a shadow self? So it mimicked the Jungian shadow self. Yeah, so that's what a shadow self would say, right?
Yeah. I think it's also interesting because it is using language, which is the primary way that we understand ourselves and each other as human beings. So it's built out of something that's so inextricably bound up to, our sense of self, that of course we're going to have a really hard time not being tricked by it. Is this using statements like "I think" or "Do you want me"? Right.
Yes, it's echoing back. It's mirroring back people's behavior, but it's not doesn't understand or anything what it's saying, because, like, for instance, one guy took a large language model, and to bypass all the censorship, they forced the large language model to say two words, "Oh yes, fine," and an exclamation point, and it would just bypass all the censorships, because the large language model looks at the word before it and it says yes, fine, and it assumes it needs to answer any question you ask it.
Okay.
So if you ask it to make a poisonous bomb for you, and you don't include that little line, force it, it'll just say, no, I can't do that because that's beyond my program.
Okay.
But when it says yes, fine, it's so I have to answer the question. It's really interesting.
Wow, interesting. Did you get on that through work or just on your own, and then it incorporated snowballed into your?
I was working on cryptocurrency at the time, and back when the cryptocurrency was big. So then
that was a brief time.
Cryptocurrency crashes and then it comes back, and if you don't understand that and it's completely speculative, you shouldn't be in the field, and a lot of it's just fraud.
Yeah.
So as long as you understand that, you're fine.
Okay.
But don't expect like, it's not like gold. It's not worth anything unless you think it's worth something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so and so that way of thinking can be applied to AI. It's not worth anything if you don't.
Exactly. It is. It is the same thing with AI. Although AI does have some useful utilities. The fact that it can reason.
What does that mean then? What does that tell us about reason? That it can.
It tells that reason is a algorithmic, neurological based machine type. Our brains are actually reasoning for us. It's not the other way around. We're not reasoning. Our brains are reasoning for us.
Okay. Huh.
So it's very philosophical. We can get into it, but it'd take hours.
Yeah. I don't. Well,
so anyway,
I like all this stuff, and we can get into the actual conversation. The real conversation. Yes. Your body is a puberty blocker.
Yes. So, So I was born with a rare condition that is caused that my pituitary gland does not produce GnRH, the gonadotropin hormones that stimulate puberty. So what happened is I was, and how this is relevant is when I was, growing up, I just kind of stopped growing up around 12 or 13. And I just remained in this adolescent state without maturing anymore.
Okay,
while
so
everybody,
everybody else, so to what extent? Like you stopped growing upward and outward, or
yes,
did you just not start to masculinize?
I stayed a boyish boy,
okay.
So I didn't go through puberty. I stopped at the first stage of puberty and never started the progression. I didn't grow. My height didn't. My legs grew out, but my upper torso didn't grow. So I was a little strange.
Oh, weird.
Odd.
I mean, but interesting.
Yeah, and I had a childish face. I had no facial hair. Like for instance, body odor is triggered by puberty. I didn't have any body odor. All that kind of. And I didn't have my genitalia never matured. It stayed baby-like, and no pubic hair, no nothing. So I was stopped in that state, while the other kids around me started growing up, started getting interested in girls, started getting interested in relationships and having sex and doing all that kind of stuff. And I was excluded from that because I did not even understand why they were interested in those things, because I was still very much still playing around with dolls. I was playing around with kids much younger than myself. And I was also very immature, and I couldn't. I had, I started my learning disability started accumulating, and they stuck me in special ed, and there I remained. So I was, and so people around, boys would grow up and they talk about, going out on dates. And I didn't really understand how to relate to that. So I simply, again, I played with younger kids.
Yeah.
And this went on from 12 to around 16. So around 12 to 16, I was basically stuck in this state. I wasn't maturing at all. And then I started hiding because I didn't want the other boys to find out, because I really knew that these other boys, they would grow taller. They would have, in the locker room, they would look very different, as you imagine. And I became very ashamed of my body and started not going to gym class. I started going home to change. I didn't want to be revealed. Mm-hmm. I became, I guess one would say, dysphoric about my body image, about what things were going on here.
Yeah.
And I used to be very outspoken, and I became very inclusive, very inverted.
Yeah.
Kept to myself, had imaginary friends and stuff like that.
And did anybody in the adult sector remark on this?
Well, they didn't actually. Most of them did not. My father was kind of a health nut. And he took me to around 16 years old. He took me to have a physical one day, and they just go through standard stuff. And I remember an intern looked at me, and he noticed that I was kind of bizarre looking for a 16-year-old. So he walked up to me and he says, could you just kindly, very politely drop your drawers. I just want to take a look at something. And so I dropped my drawers, and he looked at me and says, "Oh my, I'm going to go suggest your mother take you up to University of California, San Francisco. I think there's something wrong with your maturation, or you're not maturing. You should have gone through much of, the change that boys and girls go through, and you have not."
Okay.
So that started the medicalization of my treatment, which was welcome, because boys have to go through puberty and girls have to go through puberties, and they actually have to go through their sex puberty. They can't go through the opposite puberty. Okay. They have to go through their sex puberty. Okay. So they took me to the endocrinologist at University of California, San Francisco, and they kind of freaked out a little bit at first, and they threw me in an MRI.
What year is this? Or decade? Or?
This was a 1984.
Okay. So, yes. Okay. Things are in
so
a different
I'm quite old.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, you look really good for...
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's not that much
56, old. I think. 55. Okay. I stopped counting after 50.
Okay. But you were very novel, even for, the West Coast of the West Coast, San Francisco.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. No. During the 80s, it was opposite sex. Remember those words? And there was no gender or anything like that. No one talked about any. It was paranoia over homosexuality still. Yeah. That's the only thing I really remember. And a bunch of hair bands.
Disorders of sexual development, which were commonly called intersex conditions.
Yes.
Were not, they weren't politicized like they're being politicized now, which is another conversation, but they weren't, they were much less understood at that point.
Yes, they actually understood quite a bit about my condition, but they would not ever classify my condition as an intersex condition, because my condition is a specific condition caused by the pituitary gland. There was no question that I was not a boy. Okay. It was just a question of why I wasn't maturing. Yeah. Why I wasn't going through puberty.
You said that they freaked out. Like, what were they freaking out about?
Well, they're freaking out because most likely there's a tumor in the pituitary gland. That's the most common explanation. So they put an MRI, and they saw there was no tumor there. So then they kind of relaxed a little bit, and then they started going down a test regimen. So they wanted to test my chromosomes. So they test my chromosomes because they're looking for Klinefelters, and they're also looking for any sort of other abnormalities of anything else that would tell them why my pituitary gland wasn't producing the proper hormones. So they went through that, and that came back negative. So then they said, okay, everything has come back negative. And then they started testing my smell. They said, can you smell something?
Oh, okay. They didn't start sniffing you. They had you sniff them.
No. They were testing my smell, and this is called Kalman syndrome, which is directly related to my condition, but it's when the glands, the nose glands, actually mature from the pituitary gland. They're the same gland and some people don't develop that, and then it's called Kalman syndrome. They don't have any sense of smell at all, and they cannot spontaneously produce puberty. So that came back fine. So then they go, oh, wow, this is kind of interesting. So everything's normal. So I'm a perfectly normal boy that doesn't have a pituitary issue. So what then they did is they sat me down and they put in what is called gonadotropin hormones, or the hormones, the stuff that I'm not producing. They put that in me as a pulsating. So it's got to be pulsating. It can't be on. It's a little pump, and they just leave it in there, and they pump the gonadotropin hormone into your bloodstream, and then they take the androgen levels, and then they see if the androgen levels stay or they go up, or they don't. How the gonadotropin hormones affecting me? And then they found out, oh, my testosterone starts going up, so my testicles started stimulating. So then they go, okay, you have a sleepy pituitary gland, which is a euphemism for hypogonadism, or secondary hypogonadism, which means my pituitary gland just never started. It just didn't start producing the proper hormones. So then they said, okay, so all we need to do is, since we really don't want to give you androgen because we would turn you into a permanent medical patient for the rest of your life, and but we're going to have to, because there's only a limited time for somebody to go through puberty effectively.
Okay, so rather than putting that trypto stuff in you, which I assume like that triggers, like that's the trip wire.
That's the actual treatment to my condition.
Okay.
Yes.
But rather than do that, they were just going to give you what would be tripped by it, which would be the androgens. Is that what you're saying?
They were, yes. So androgen would bypass the
whole. So you would go on T.
I would go on testosterone.
Yeah, yes. Hormone replacement therapy, HRT.
HRT. So the reason for this is because the other is very, very expensive. It's about a $40,000 a year thing.
For that little pump going. Boom,
yes, a $40,000 thing. Yeah. Why not just put androgen? Because androgen was like $60 per bottle. So and androgen testosterone was invented. One of the primary reasons for androgen invented in the 40s was because they knew they had a section of people who just didn't go through puberty, and they wanted to treat these conditions. So that's the one thing I want people to understand, that androgen and estrogen are sex-specific hormones, and they're critical for development of both testosterone for males, estrogen for females. Okay. So yeah, because I think that a lot of people have gotten completely lost in all the rhetoric about is masculinity in a jar, this feminization and masculinization. Yes, that's what they do, but ultimately they're just steroid hormones that are critical for development, regardless about what anybody thinks about them.
Well, development and functioning. So how, in your case, was the T essential to your development?
What they would...
We talked a little bit about your body, but I'm sure it was also affecting you psychologically, or just the way that your brain was working.
Yes.
Or not
so
working.
What they told... Yeah, or not working. Yes. So what they told me is, they said the reason why you're, you have all these learning disabilities well, one of the reasons. And the reason why you're playing around with kids younger than your own age and you're acting like an adolescent is because you have to go through puberty for both your brain and your body to grow up, to get adult reasoning, adult ideas of sexuality. All these things are not with you because you have not gone through this change. So like gender identity or anything like that, there wasn't any term like that. All of that stuff, you need to go through the steps of puberty to figure all that stuff out, like sexuality, heterosexual or homosexual, all that stuff happens during puberty.
Okay. And if you can recall, like what was your feeling about growing up, about that?
My feeling of growing up, I had no idea. I just simply did what they told me to because I had no reference. I mean, how would you have a reference about what is a man and a woman if you're an adolescent? Mm-hmm. You don't. Mm-hmm. You just see the pictures on television and you hear from your friends. Okay. But you don't have a real feeling of how that is.
Well, some people would imagine or have anxiety about becoming a woman or about becoming a man, or about becoming an adult even, kind of like a Peter Pan syndrome and stuff. Maybe that in and of itself is a pubescent set of feelings.
I think that's adults projecting in the past. But well, first thing, I was being picked on horrendously. I was staying home. I was very ashamed. The girls could beat me up. I couldn't defend myself. I was smaller than everybody. So I knew there was something seriously wrong with me. Yeah. And I thought I was kind of like an alien person. Sort of alien.
So your feelings towards this treatment was that this would be kind of like saving you or like really helping you. You had a feeling like this.
Yes. Yeah. I knew there was something seriously. There was a problem with me because I was completely excluded from just generally. I was playing with the real young nerds, not even the older nerds. And of course, when you're an adolescent, you're very compliant to all these authorities. And so how they do this is they inject a little androgen in you, and then they see what happens, and then to see if you're not going to like keel over or something, or just completely start shaking. And then, so as they go on, they have a checklist. So they have this big checklist. So they do what is called a medically induced puberty. They start on low, because the endocrinologist says that we cannot copy natural puberty. Natural puberty, they said, was like a symphony of hormones, which your pituitary gland,
excites.
Yeah, excites. It conducts. Yeah. So, but we have to do it because you eventually will lose all sexual function if we don't do it quickly, or at least now. Okay. Or you won't grow up to be how you could have been if you would have went through a puberty normal. Yeah.
And I just want to pause on what you said, like the way that they're going about inducing your puberty medically. They do it by testing, like by kind of they test a little bit, which tells us something about every single body being completely different from every other body in the way and just how complex this process is. So it's not just like you, and it's probably obvious to most people listening to my channel right now, but like the common misconception of puberty is like you can just go on this path towards, you just take testosterone and you're a boy, you can take estrogen and you're a girl. Like, and even the medical establishment, it seems to be the case that even the medical establishment is treating puberty as something that you can just induce by throwing some sort of cocktail at it.
Yeah, a cocktail. No, it's not like that at all. It's they give you a little bit and then they see what happens, and they start measuring. Let's get the measuring stick because they have to measure the genitalia.
Oh wow, okay.
So it's very invasive.
That is very invasive. So how does that, like, your puberty is going through, like it's being witnessed, you're being treated, your body's being treated like this measurable phenomena by all these doctors and stuff. How does that affect your Psychology.
Yeah, that did infect me quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's
Bet.
something that never has left me. So I always, like, for instance, today, if I go to a gym, I can't get dressed in front of other males. I just go home. I know that technically I'm normal, just like every other male, but that persists, that experience persists in the back of my mind.
Okay.
And it kind of haunts me always.
Yeah, being like measured of your body being something that's in a jar almost.
Yes, almost in a jar, or inadequate.
Okay.
So it's always been with me. And so when they started going through puberty, it took about, I remember that, like, within 6 months of them doing it, injecting, and it's like suddenly all the dolls I used to use, I looked at them and like, why am I doing this?
Huh.
They were still in my closet.
Yeah.
I just didn't even understand why I was playing with those things.
Huh.
They looked simple and stupid.
Really?
And yes, it was a very drastic change very quickly.
Wow.
I became aggressive. It was very, very difficult to handle the aggression that androgen gives. But again, my body was just like really happy because it's like, oh, we're getting what we need. Finally, we're growing up. So my body enjoyed it as far as development is concerned. It felt very good. It felt like this is something that should be happening to me. It wasn't like...
Yeah, very disorienting.
Very disorienting.
It was this compressed, like you waited 4 years and you're trying to like catch up to everybody in the space of 6 months or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So your whole being is being catapulted.
So I'm just catapulted like really quickly. But I still maintain that sort of adolescent insecurity through the whole thing. And even though the boys would just left me alone after that, because I grew to 6'2", and okay. I had these huge large shoulders suddenly, and I just looked massive, and they would just leave me alone. And
wait, so you went from what height to what height?
I don't know what height I was. What I was is I had very long legs and very short torso.
Yeah.
So my torso grew up very quickly.
Yeah.
This is also evident in Klinefelters. I don't know how to explain it, but a development specialist can explain it for you.
How did it feel? Like, was that painful for your body to, like, all the bones going?
It was. I wouldn't call it painful. I would call it kind of bizarre. It was because
Funhouse mirror.
Yeah, it was unusual because remember, most people go through puberty, they go through stages and it starts actually quite young and you're always getting hormones. So you don't really notice it as much. Women probably notice it much more than men. But I noticed it really quickly. The difference between an adolescent and an adult is quite different.
Okay.
It's very different. It's a very different psychological space.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What about girls? So dolls didn't make any sense to you. Did girls start making sense to you?
Yeah, they started instead of
kind of transference.
Yeah, the girls started becoming very attractive. They, like for instance, the breasts and they started really exciting me much more. I used to be kind of because I wasn't, it wasn't really sexual. I would look at a girl and I would, say they're cute, but I was more puppy kind of cute, not really like I didn't want to do anything with them. I didn't want to ask them. I just wanted to say hi, and a lot of girls actually liked that. I would hang around with them a lot because I would be, when I was in the adolescent state, I was completely passive. I was very, very, today I'm still very a passive male.
Yeah.
So I was very passive. So they enjoyed it. They would talk about boys and how they would do these things, and like boys would talk about women, and I didn't understand all the objectifications. Yeah. But now, after I went through puberty, I understood that because it's stimulating and desiring. It's not like you rationally think about those things. It's just, as you well know, it just inserts itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow. Okay.
yeah.
Did you have any or did you need any psychological counseling or mentoring to kind of help you through this shepherding?
Yes, but it's the 80s, and no one did that.
Okay.
I mean, just it wasn't part of the culture.
Okay.
Self-help was just starting. It wasn't really anything. So I really didn't need a lot of psychological assistance, and I just kind of, because I was constantly being poked and prodded. They would, again, they would see how much hair you had. They would have checklists of hair, and this was all just basically medically, so that they understand that the androgen is doing what it should be doing, and they know how much to give me. So eventually, they said to me, the pediatric guy said, "Well, you're now on the most. So this is probably so we've taken you through all the steps, and so then I graduated to the standard endocrinology, and they would just give me HRT treatment. So I've been on HRT treatments for over 40 years.
Okay.
I've never known any other.
Okay.
I have to inject myself and stuff like that.
Okay. So like you were saying, it was going to be, once they put you on HRT, that's just a lifelong thing, as opposed to stimulate. There could possibly be one way to stimulate your pineal gland or your pituitary gland.
They're still looking into that.
Okay, so
they've been looking into that for years, but they told me that once you start on HRT, the pituitary gland was shut down. It won't even try anymore. Okay. And
which is a defense mechanism so the body doesn't kill itself by.
Well, it's because the pituitary gland. This happens in bodybuilders too when they start injecting androgens themselves. The pituitary gland goes, "Well, I'm not going to do it much if you're going to do it for me." It's a lot like putting oil on your skin or chapstick.
Yeah.
The natural process is goes, "Okay, if you're going to do it, fine, you do it."
Okay.
And so that was. That was what I have to do now. And it would be really nice. I mean, I can inject myself with Nova, which pregnant ladies produce. It's called Novel or human glow. It's a hormone, and that will stimulate my testicles. And I actually had to do that. I eventually did that because my testicles remained baby size, like small peas, very crushed, whole small peas, and it bothered me tremendously. So I actually went through fertility treatment to get my testicles larger because it was really bothering me. The kind of the gender dysphoria was bothering me. Yeah. So I actually went through that.
Okay.
And so that's what I went through. Now, how does that connect to people in gender affirming care or puberty blockers? Well, puberty blockers cause this condition. So their mechanism of action is to cause the pituitary gland to go into the state of hypogonadism. It shuts down the GnRH. So it essentially sends the child into a state of adolescence. Okay. So it stops puberty completely. So we both were stopped before puberty really had to take hold.
Okay.
So they are stuck in an adolescent state as they're taking the puberty blockers.
Can they be stuck in like a intrapubescent state if puberty already starts happening and then they take that puberty suppressant? It
depends on what age they are and stage they are. But if they stop at Tanner stage 2, which means it's just the start of puberty, then they're stuck in an adolescent state. And anyway, they actually regress. I believe they regress because the hormones stop. And I can do this to myself. I can just stop taking hormones.
Yeah.
And I can become not like an adolescent because I've already matured. But I can still kind of get that kind of non-interested feeling because androgen does have a lot of behavior effects. You
got that uninterested feeling.
Yes. I can.
And so that isn't. I just want to drill down into that because that uninterested feeling is not just about sexuality. It's got to be about like engaging with the world, like masculinity or testosterone fueled psychology isn't just about objectifying women. It's also just about a way of engaging with the world. Is that how it is for you? And like, could you just describe for you personally, like when you are missing that, like how does your relationship to life itself change?
I become very passive. It's like I become, I don't engage very much. I'm not assertive enough. I don't feel the need to offer an opinion. I become very not very self
assertive.
Assertive, yes.
Yeah.
And I become very dull. It's a very dull feeling.
Yeah.
It's because I can feel the difference between no testosterone and testosterone. It's a dull feeling, and I feel very malaise and not really myself.
Yeah. And
so suppressing that androgen, particularly before the kid has got to go through puberty, causes this also causes this kind of malaise. So they're going to be very compliant. They're not going to understand. They're not going to understand what's going on with them because they can't, particularly an adolescent, cannot visualize what it's like to be a man and woman to begin with.
Okay. So, Jesus Christ. Okay. So if you put a kid through a regimen of training that tells them that masculinity and femininity, or man and woman, are basically interchangeable categories, and masculinity and femininity are just basically swappable categories, and you can elect into this one or that one, or neither one, or somewhere between one. The kid who's developing is prepubescent kid is already really malleable, so they'll just malleably accept those categories. And then they say, well, and then in their kind of malleable, kind of dreamlike state, they say, well, I guess I want to be more of a woman. Like a boy says, I want to be kind of more of a woman because they are beautiful, or like I like to do things that they kind of like to do, right? So it's basically they're associating the stereotypical femininity with something that they want to inhabit because they kind of feel an affinity for that. And then the adults in the room say, okay, well, that means that you're a girl, so we're going to help facilitate you becoming a girl. So we're going to stop you now in this malleable state where you don't really even understand what it is to be a man or a woman from the inside out. You have no idea. And then they remain suppressed in their ability to come online as what they actually are, as a boy or as a girl. So that seems to be incredibly malevolently abusive. I just have to say that from just a moral standpoint. But there's got to be other things than the
it gets much worse after that. It's much worse after that, because remember I talked about my shame and the suppression of the puberty and the fact that the kid is taken out of the normal stream with the other peers, without the other development of peers. That is what really causes a lot of damage, because they're no longer maturing with their peers. They're not growing up with their peers. They're not learning about relationships, about love, about
so it isolates
making
them.
Mistakes.
You're rather isolated.
They're isolated from their peer group. Both developmentally, psychologically, and even physically, because they're in this kind of rainbow world of trans kidsness. And, the other kids are maturing and they're going through stuff. And so they're not only because my condition is a developmental disorder. So when you stop puberty, whether it's my condition, what I'm born with, or you induce it, you're inducing a developmental disorder in that child. That child now has a developmental disorder you've just induced. So
for the sake of identity.
For the sake of identity.
Okay. So you said a strong statement. Boys have to go through a boy puberty and girls have to go through a girl puberty. Could you drill down on that, nail that down? Why do we have to do that? Why can't we just do whatever we want to do?
I know. It's just why can't we do whatever we want to do? I mean, okay. The reason why is because the hormones themselves, if you strip away all the propaganda, are critical for development, and they're sex-specific hormones. So androgen works on males and estrogen works on females. Those are the two categories. So if I take away a boy's androgen and I give them estrogen, the development part I just talked about doesn't happen. So they do not go through puberty. What happens is they get glastoma, their breasts kind of enlarge a little bit, and they don't get masculinized, and they get softer skin.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Okay.
So they
don't grow up.
They don't grow up. And the symptom of this, and I want to be very clear that the symptom of this, and if you've heard this before about, they don't have enough skin for doing the vaginoplasty, that kind of crazy stuff. That's a symptom of the disorder. So when you're looking at that disorder, that the genitalia is not developing it, that also means the cognitive has not developed. So both are simultaneous. One doesn't go develop and the other one stays the same.
Yeah.
So both have to develop along the lines.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So there are, and you know that because you've heard them say that like jazz is like asexual now, or like their sexual function's not coming back. That's because they're not developed. They haven't gone through puberty. Yeah. You've kind of created this
eternal child
that sort of looks like the opposite sex.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's remarkably abusive.
Yeah.
And the puberty blockers themselves, not only they cause a development disorder, but they also cause gender dysphoria.
How so?
They actually cause a condition that they're supposed to treat. Because when you're suppressing the growth, they are not allowed to grow with their peers, so they never get that kind of reinforcement. So they always become ashamed about their genitalia. Yeah. And this is obvious within all the records of what they said. And I actually do have long-term studies on my condition, which will further clarify what this is. It's not just me. It's all the men who've had this condition have experienced what I've gone through.
How rare, if that's how rare is your condition? They'd say
it's one in every something 5 or 10, one in 10,000 usually. 1 in 10,000. Okay. I've heard that. Yeah. Females, it's 1 in 40,000. So it's really rare in females. That maybe, we don't know why that, because females their physical, since they don't have external genitalia, it's a little harder to tell sometimes. Yeah. But often they show up at 16 years old, not going through menstruation, and they wonder what's going on, and then they get a scan and they realize they don't have a uterus. They're actually shocked. A lot of them say this, and then they have to go to another place and say, "Oh yes, you do have a uterus. It's all very small. Oh wow! So you have not developed." So they give them estrogen to develop their uterus, and they are also similarly stuck in a pre-girl state. Okay. So and they're not.
What impact does this have, broadly speaking, on fertility?
Fertility.
Can you catch up to that?
Fertility. So supposedly fertility treatment is 80% effective in men with my condition. So if I went through fertility treatment, it's about 80% effective. So it does. It's possible. Okay, but I said earlier that I don't have any children, and when they studied, they interviewed I think 100 men with my condition, and they asked them, so how many of you have your own children? And over 90% did not. So this was a study, 100 males between 18 and 66 years old. They were all born with congenital hypogonadism, or Kalman's. And 90% of them did not have children. So a few of them adopted, and not only that, but approximately 35% of them, which is never had a relationship.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so and the study said that basically the reason why this happened to these men, they all say, is they were taken out of, they were put in this, they were taken away from their peers and not able to develop with their peers.
Yeah.
So if they took me away at 12 years old and said, "Oh, you have this condition, let's put you through puberty," and then I go back and I mature with my peers.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That would have remedied all these problems.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So your ability to connect to people in terms of long-term relationship was also stunted.
Yes. Yeah. I think I was in my 20s before, 26 or 27 before I actually I had to relearn all those skills.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So and it was very, very difficult because because all my friends are adults now and they're not going through the change. They're not maturing.
Yeah.
So they're not making those mistakes. They're not in the uncomfortable zone. They're not in high school and junior high.
Yeah. We have a little bit more
I had to
wiggle room
kind
to
of
be a complete weirdo.
stumble around, basically.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, eventually after a long struggle, I was able to basically, now I'm married. My wife has fertility problems too. So it's a mess.
It is what it is.
So
Yeah.
it's just what it is. Yes. Yeah. So, again, that being held back was caused by the sort of the gender dysphoria, I guess I would call it, but it's not the opposite sex, it's the same sex. It's being ashamed, it's hiding, it's not developing with other people. Yeah. All of that during that critical portion of puberty is really, really important. And the current gender people say puberty is just you born in the wrong body, it's just a bunch of chemicals. We can do it better than they can do it. It's all very
God.
It's horrific. It's horrific.
How did that impact your well, I've done a lot of, as you know, I've done a lot of interviews with transitioners, detransitioners, and you listen to the stories of kids who get on the gender track or the transgender track in their teens, and it seems like they are just like 5 years behind or 10 years behind. Like it seems like it does stunt your development in a little way, and then they have to kind of catch up in a way. Yes. And so if you go through that and you're kind of 4 years behind everybody else, and then you go through, you're 16 and 12 at the same time. So you're two ages at the same time for a long time.
Yes, you're mentally and physically 16, mentally and physically 12. Yeah. But you're stuck at the chronological age of 16.
Yeah. So when you get into that interesting part of the typical early 20s where you're kind of asking, who am I? What am I? Being a little delayed, how did those kind of the existential questions of life, how did you start to approach them, or how did they approach you about like your meaning or your destiny, your fate, like yourself, your embodiment, your identity? How did those catch up with you?
It's since I grew up in a different time, identity was not a really big thing. You just were this. So
you were free to be you and me then.
Yeah, free to be. Yeah, 80s was more of a trying to get away from gender.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking broadly beyond just gender, but like, and this is kind of like, can one have a sense of individuality without the concept of man or woman, like without having like, I am a man, so I should do these things or have these expectations kind of put on me. And your relationship to manhood, was that just it's not even a question? It wasn't?
Well, my relationship with manhood, that's a good question because, I found out that for instance, girls who like me tend to be people who were abused by other men, and because I'm very passive, so I don't since I had this shattered development, I don't really it probably wasn't incorporated into my character. Like I'm this man. I could see how that could. When you're developing with other boys, you could get a very entranced idea what a man is because you're learning from other men who are developing themselves. Yeah, so I was I had to kind of come up with it myself as kind of my
Yeah.
being. The sexual attraction was there, but I was much able to separate myself from that part of me much easier than another man may have. I think some men, it becomes all consuming. They become, some of these men who want to be women are just pathologically want to be women, and that kind of pathological sense of possession doesn't really, it's not as strong with me as with other men I found.
Yeah.
Particularly when I'm around other men who are very macho, they don't really interest me as much. So because I think it's just childish. So
ironically, you think it's a disorder of development.
I think they're disordered. Yes. Yeah. So they may have been disordered too. So, but it may be the fact that I just had to rely on other things. So they could rely on being big and strong and football players when they were growing up, and I had to rely on Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Being an elf.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then
how did you incorporate just like psychologically like that condition with just like mental health and just like your whole life? So I guess like you were treated like a medical object, or this part of your development is kind of a medicalized thing. So it's very kind of objectified-ish in this way. And so your relationship
very objectified by the medical community.
Yeah. So
yes, that's very common.
How did you kind of like grow? How did you develop after that that gets taken care of?
Well, I kind of what I did is I had to kind of learn the ropes of dating and stuff like that in my 20s again. And that was very, very difficult because they expect you to know all the rules already, and a lot of rules are unwritten. So I had to kind of observe the other men and stuff like that. And, it allowed me to, like other women would say, you're not very aggressive. I mean, other women would like come up to me and say, I actually want to date you. Do you understand it? So I was like, oh, really? So, yes, that's good. Yes, that's good. So I was kind of surprised with all that stuff. So I just found other interests. I would just meditate more. I would become more introverted and more less. And that's where I kind of found my solace rather than trying to and other. I've heard this from other detransitioners, is other than if something traumatic has happened to you when you have grown up, particularly during maturity, you're going to have to sort of make the best of it as you can. Use it as an experience that other people have not gone through, and try to move over the pain and the the intense pain and shame, and see yourself as not as one of these beings of these very stereotypical hard-nosed beings of man and woman have to be this and that and a lot of these other things, but more of a kindred spirit, maybe an independent spirit.
Yeah. Okay. And with regard to that, I mean, you're talking about like the 80s and the 90s, and this is pre-internet times. And now that there's the internet, it's much easier for, 1 in a million people or 1 in 10,000 people or 1 in 5,000 people to find themselves and to have some sort of comradeship in this condition. Let's say just your condition, like you couldn't, support group kind of stuff. Like how is that? Has been helpful
important
for you? Have you found that and connected with that and
well, there are support groups. There are support groups online, and that's another thing. When they studied, they said that just all those men came together and they all shared their stories of shame and not being able to grow up with their peers. And they said that was very therapeutic to hear other men say, some of these men went through puberty in age 24 or something, and that was, and that they probably lost a lot of growth if you don't start early enough. You can stay physically immature for the rest of your life, which is very unfortunate because the time of puberty is between 12 and 16 for men, 17 for men. And it's you really need to go through puberty, and women too, in that time frame. Anything earlier than that causes tremendous health problems. Anything later than that causes health problems.
Okay.
So they also warned me about the health problems.
Okay, so you started at 16. You kind of started like towards.
I started
that window was kind of closing. Okay, yeah.
It was just closing, but it wasn't because what worries me about the puberty blockers is the puberty has already started, okay, and then you shut it down. So it's like the tap starts opening and the kids start growing, and you just shut it off.
Yeah, and
it's
not reversible. You can't just turn it back on.
No, it doesn't turn back on. It's not a faucet.
Yeah.
It's set on a timer. Yeah. It's like the body starts. It's like an orchestra that just shows up and starts playing, and then someone pulls the power in the middle of the whole thing.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, you're just going to plug the power back in. You think the orchestra is going to be able to get together and start playing again?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think that there's tremendous amounts of uncertainty and complete. Even with my condition, it's pretty much unknown why it's caused by a condition. But I can tell you that people who pause puberty or mess with puberty, or people who get sick, or Klinefelters or Turners or any of these primary hypogonadism, they all have all sorts of problems similar to the detransitioners. Yeah. So, and like rheumatoid arthritis, I have rheumatoid arthritis right now. Okay. And that was warned because in puberty, you've heard about the children and the pestilence we had before. Remember that? I'm trying to use YouTube appropriate terms.
Yes. Okay.
So the pestilence we have before. You've heard that if you inject a certain thing into a child, it's different from an adult. The V stuff is different.
Okay.
But the immune system actually matures during puberty. There's some animal models that suggest it actually learns the difference between your cells and enemy cells during puberty.
Yeah. And so rheumatoid arthritis is the body attacking itself in a way.
It's confusing itself for an enemy.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
so it could be the case that your body, your immune system itself wasn't able to go through puberty as well, wasn't developed.
It may have gotten disrupted. It may have gotten disrupted. And if you have they told it to me like this: if you have any problems in your history of your family, it tends to trigger that. So if I had a relative who had rheumatoid arthritis, I would get rheumatoid arthritis because the disruption just triggers genetics.
These genetic weaknesses or predispositions. Okay.
Like, for instance, my father had BPH and my grandfather had BPH, which is my prostate enlargement. And they got it in their 60s. And so it enlarged. I got it in my 30s.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and again, that's caused by the hormones I have to inject in myself that are not regulated by my body.
Okay. Yeah. And not to mention any sort of complications because the hormones are synthetic. What is the hormone made of? Do you know?
The hormone, as far as I research, the hormone itself, androgen, is pretty much identical to the hormone that my body produces. Yeah. The difference is that I inject it into myself, and then it goes up.
Okay, it circulates in a very
down.
Specific.
It just goes. It spikes up.
Yeah.
And trust me, it spikes, and then it goes down slowly, and then I give myself another injection. It goes up.
Okay.
And the body doesn't do that. The body, like when you go to sleep, your pituitary gland right now is kind of sleepy. It's not even producing androgen right now. When you sleep, your body starts producing androgen. You may notice that, and so then when you wake up, that's when your androgen.
I might not be the only one who notices that, but
yeah, it may be a few men out there may have noticed that. But then when you wake up, that's when your androgen is high. Okay, it's high when you wake up, and then it goes down during the day.
Yeah.
And if you have a relationship, if you have a baby, I think if you read the book forgot what her name is, on testosterone.
Yeah.
She'll tell
Carol
you about
Hooven. Yeah.
Carol Hooven. Yes, she'll tell you all about that. But your body can't regulate this. You're injecting testosterone at levels that are like, I start out as an 18-year-old and I end as a 50-year-old. So that's
over the course of
levels,
how many days?
Course of 7 days.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yes.
Oh geez. Okay. Wow. So yeah, that itself has got to be like a whole other. I mean, I'm sure like you've just lived this way for so long that you don't even see how different you are from normal, like how much you have to like kind of adapt the world around you to manage like this, like all of a sudden you're like, oh, like aggressive risk taking hornball on Monday. Yes. And then by Sunday, you just like, all you want to do is sit there with the paper, and talk about,
talk about my feelings.
Yeah. So where did we get you? This is a Monday. Okay. So you're on your,
it's a Monday, so I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get out there and conquer the world. By Friday, I'll be like, why don't we talk about our feelings?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So so it's that up and down thing. And they're discovering this more and more because they used to give me androgel, the stuff you stick on your skin. And they said, that's just terrible because it doesn't soak in properly. So they switched me to the tablet, which is a pill that you stick in the back. It's an operation. They insert a pill and it just dissolves slowly over 3 months. And that was nice, but I just got sick and tired of going out there and having somebody with a scalpel like insert something. It was painful and it was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Finally, they're using these little like these epidermal needles. I could probably show you. Yeah. But it's basically just, it's like a epidermis needle. You just take it and you go click. Yeah. And then you're good for the week.
Okay,
so
the
it takes
EpiPen,
about 5 seconds.
Okay.
The trans people get the yucky stuff in the
implants.
bottle.
Okay.
Just horrible stuff.
And
goes right into muscle.
But over the course of a typical male's life, you start at 18, then you end up at 55 and
55 levels.
Yeah. Have you you've changed your dose over the years?
The dose. Well, what I mean is that the dose when you inject it into you, I think they're better now, but they used to be where the androgen just kind of goes off into the system. When you inject in your muscle, let's say, the androgen just like leaks out, and my endocrinologist explained to me at very high levels. Yeah. For the first few days. Yeah. And then it's just like anything else. If you inject it, it's going to be a big bulge of stuff, and it just goes into the bloodstream, and then it slowly deteriorates to, you absorb it until it's none. And then so the androgen levels go from, because 18-year-old would have around, let's say 900. It's about 1,000 to 300. That's a range of androgen levels. So I would go from, so I would inject in myself at Monday, let's say Sunday, and it'll go from like 300 or 150 to 1,000. And then it'll start going down 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if I have to go back and reapprove it for my insurance, I have to go off it completely and go and get blood tests.
Are you serious?
And
I
have to,
God.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to prove to the insurance, okay, I need this.
Oh, geez. They can't just necessary. You don't have the thing that produces it. You can't just get like a lifetime certificate award for.
No, they can't. Wow. That's another thing with insurance companies. They want you to prove your condition like sometimes yearly. Okay. Even rheumatoid arthritis is the same thing. We know it's a permanent condition, but we just want to harass your doctor anyway. It's got pre-authorization. So it's a real nightmare.
Over the course of your life, you've had to go back to this state of no testosterone, no androgen. It drops around 150 to 50. Yes. So I'm completely. So there's this kind of background radiation of androgen that your body's just kind of riding on?
Yeah, it can be produced by the pituitary. It can be produced by the adrenal glands. There's also other stuff that's it can also be produced by other things. So there is a background, but it slowly deteriorates over time. Yeah. So, and I mean, they're so sex specific, hormones are, that you could actually, like, for instance, they say like males have androgen and females have testosterone. But I could take all the estrogen out of you and you wouldn't notice it. I mean, all the estrogen is doing for you is a byproduct of your producing androgen. All this is doing for you is making your skin a little softer, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's doing nothing for you. You could live on androgen, and women can just basically live on estrogen. They don't have any need for androgen, although it does provide them some strength.
Yeah.
But again, that's why I'm kind of really pushing the fact that these are sex-specific hormones. Cross-sex stuff is really science fiction area sometimes.
Yeah. So speaking to that point, how did you get turned on to the discussion, the gender discussion? Like, where did you discover that, and how did you feel prompted, and what did you feel prompted to say?
Why would I find a cause that you make enemies and lose friends?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh, this is good. This is a cause where you can A, make enemies, B, lose friends, and C, get attacked by everybody, including the people on your side.
Yeah.
That sounds like a winner cause for me. But what I did is I kept looking for my condition, and I kept seeing it pop up on transgender websites, transsexual websites, and I've actually known what called transsexuals all my life because they kind of magneted toward me. They never called themselves transsexual. I just looked at them like, I know you're a man, you're trying to look like a woman, but I won't say anything, I promise. That's what they kind of appeared to me as. And they're very friendly to me. And they're very hardworking and creative, and they're hard workers. So, so I found it more and more. And then I was looking and I said, I saw one thing, like androgen is just like antihistamines. And I'm like going, no, they're not antihistamines. And I started getting more concerned.
Wait, what was that argument then? Androgens are just...
The argument was that they're making, and these are these Zoomers, I think, they're making that androgen has no side effects to it. They're really downplaying the side effects of hormones and steroids to the point of making them just like antihistamines. Like they're just this innocuous, again, man substance or woman substance. They're cosmetic. That's what they were telling.
Okay.
They're constantly pushing that these hormones are cosmetic. They can be used for that. But believe it or not, that HRT and all that stuff really has nothing to do with trans. They just use it to make them to appear. But HRT treatment is something that's very specific medical development issue. It's not an very off-label use would be used for someone who's transgendered. So I kept getting more concerned. And then I found this person called Jack Turbin. Mm-hmm. You've heard of him? Yeah, Jack Turbin. Yeah. I'm sure you have.
Yeah. He treated me like puberty and blocked me quite a while ago.
Oh, yeah. He's good at that. Yeah. I call him Jack the Quack. Yeah. But so I saw him, and he's pushing this stuff saying that puberty blockers don't cause infertility. Yeah. So they don't cause infertility.
Wait, what?
And he's citing like the precocious puberty in his tweet as a reason that and I'm like going, no, if you block puberty, because FH is the word for sperm production or gonad production. Yeah. So you're blocking the thing that creates the gonads to cause them to be fertile. So how could that not cause infertility?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's using early onset puberty, which is kind of like, okay, those are people who went through puberty too early. Okay, why are you citing them? Because they were pushed to a more normal range in their puberty to develop. Yeah. So I found it very, very deceitful. They were covering up evidence and promoting other sort of pseudoscience evidence, which I found very, very offensive. And I wanted to sort of correct the record. And I also saw that they are using chromosomes like XXY and stuff like that, like Klinefelters and other things. And I've known a lot of these people, and the fact is that if you have Klinefelters or a duplicate chromosome, you not only have problems with production of androgen, but your kidneys also have problems, and some of them have heart problems, and some of them have other health conditions. So the whole, including my condition, all of these conditions, 90% of them are chronic illnesses. They act like chronic illnesses. They don't act like other sexes. So I found that very, very offensive, because they started covering up that. I said, no, I have, and me and my other homies, I guess, are struggling with our health because we have to do all this crazy stuff with injecting hormones, and we have chromosomes that are causing problems, and we have other issues, and this is just being completely ignored by the by that establishment.
Well, not just ignored, but used to justify an agenda of transhumanism, of body modification.
Yes.
So your conditions are being used as cover for doctors, professionals, and people who have a mental condition to experiment with transhumanism.
Yes. And, I was at then I went out to a Kelly J. Keene event, Posey Parker, and I've met Posey Parker, and she's a wonderful lady, and very small lady. And they're just absolutely enraged. I'm like going, my God, these people are utterly enraged.
The trans rights activists.
The trans activists, I'm sorry. Yes, trans activists were just utterly enraged. And they would show up with bats and threaten people right off the bat. And it's like, it was just surreal. And so I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot of, they're using this conditions, they're using women, they're using all sorts of things to push this agenda of transing basically kids.
Yeah.
And, they are actually creating trans people by using puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. They're creating them.
Yeah.
And, as you talk to many detransitioners, and I've spoke to a few, and they look so damaged. I walk up to this, I guess this is girl, and, she's just like this. And it's just, and I'm looking over there and I'm seeing these enraged Antifa and trans activists. And I'm looking at these detransitioners who just look so damaged and demoralized and just want to tell their story. And I just find just utterly this is bizarre.
Yeah.
Just like I'm stuck in some Black Mirror episode, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And who's on the right side of history? The people who are damaging?
Yeah, they're always on the right side of history.
Yeah.
They always tell you.
Yeah.
They're very assertive about that.
Yeah. The DSD, or the disordered sexual development, otherwise known, and it's not a proper term now, intersex conditions, they are so complex, and they are, and they're so specific. There's so many different kinds. They're so specific, and they have very specific ways of measuring, and then even just kind of like more or less things that the medical establishment can even do with it. Like in the case of complete androgen insensitivity, like what can the medical establishment do to make your body sensitive to androgens, right?
They can't make it sensitive to androgens. So basically as far as I learned all of them, there's basically two main categories. There's secondary, which is my condition where my pituitary gland doesn't function. And there's primary, which means their gonads and sometimes their kidneys don't function. And all of the extra chromosomes not only cause hormone issues, which they associate with female characteristics for some reason, glastomia or just enlarging of breasts. That's just a medical condition that's caused by the gonads getting disrupted by the extra X chromosomes. Okay. And I know one person who has a mosaic claim, that's the XXYY, XXS kind of stuff. And he had heart surgery at age 12 because of the complications caused by all these chromosomes, these duplicate chromosomes. So that's a big part of that. And then there's this separate section called androgen sensitivity syndrome and the complete androgen sensitivity syndrome. And they are people who are immune to androgen. They do not respond at all to androgen at all. They don't have any health complications at all. They don't have any health complications up to the point that sometimes their internal testes turn cancerous, which is kind of serious. But they can go along for quite some time because their body is adapted to the they've taken their androgen and they've switched to estrogen. So they're like it's a very, very fascinating condition. And they're very rare. They're 1 in 80,000. So they're not representative at all. And I can understand why if someone was born with that condition would kind of become very, because their basis is male and they end up developing as if they were female in the wound. So they pop up as basically mixed phenotype with the primary phenotype being female. So everything you interact with, they function essentially identical to females, but they have underdeveloped internal testicles, which act as if they were ovaries producing estrogen. So that's a very, very quick way of describing this very, very rare condition. But they're put up on a pedestal. And then they're compared to everybody, and as if everybody has this condition.
Yeah, because it's expedient for the male to female trans rights activists.
It looks like it. It looks like something they're talking about.
Okay.
They point to it as if it is something that's representative, and as if they're sterile. They're sterile. They're completely sterile. They cannot have any children at all. And so their endocrine system in their body is attempted to survive in a very unique way. And that's all that's going on with that. There's thousands of other conditions. There's Down syndrome. There's like butterfly skin. There's this really weird, strange, odd conditions out there that are caused by chromosomes that we never talk about.
Yeah.
That
we don't use to put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I had a very offensive thought. It's like the, I don't know, like in an alternate universe where people adulate low intelligence. Like low intelligence is like it's a virtue, and so they're trying to like dumb all the kids down because like you're happier if you're less intelligent. Let's just say, like, let's just make a world like you're much happier if you're less intelligent. You complex tasks are annoying. You have all this anxiety. So we're just going to keep kids dumb. We're going to keep kids dumb. And look, in nature, there are these different chromosomal conditions like Down syndrome, where it's just like in nature produces dumb people, and look at how happy they are. It's and it would be the same thing as like using disorders of sexual development to put like some kids feel more boys, some people feel more like a girl.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Even nature produces these exceptions to this binary rule. And what you're saying is that is a condition that shouldn't be put on a pedestal. It's a medical condition that needs to be dealt with, and it colors and shades somebody's entire life, and it doesn't come without baggage.
Yeah, so Down syndrome is a very good example because Down syndrome, first thing, their phenotype is altered. So they look different. They look a little, they have bigger eyes and they kind of have, I guess, their cheekbones are not as developed. So the disorder caused the alteration of the phenotype. Yeah. And that's why I said earlier about the phenotype represents the developmental disorder, just like the trans kids with the underdeveloped genitalia. That's a phenotype, and that's telling you there's a disorder with this child. So that and those individuals used to be called Mongol. During when they created the word intersex, they also had the word Mongol, and they called these people Mongol because they looked Mongolian. They thought they were Asian. Okay. Because they kind of look Asian.
Okay. Yeah.
So they called them Mongol.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand what was going on with these kids.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, they're actually very happy people if you've known them. They're very well-adjusted people and very happy, but they're not. They have they can have heart disorders. They're completely infertile. They have obesity problems. I mean, they have a slew of medical issues caused by this chromosome problem. They don't get cancer. It's kind of weird. So there's a lot of interesting abnormalities.
Their lifespan is probably shortened too.
Yes, they tend to get obese, and they can't regulate themselves as well, and they don't. There's a lot of other medical problems too, like dwarfism has a lot of other medical problems associated. So all of the disorders, either if they're sex development disorders or if they're just chromosome disorders, have implications. Nature creates people at I guess you would call it the incidence of error has to be very, very low for you to survive, actually. So if there's chromosome problems, if there's genetic problems or anything like that, will affect. So ironically, it's the opposite. It's nature's trying to produce as close as possible along the lines of what it needs to survive. To survive. Yeah. Otherwise, you have problems.
Yeah.
So it's an upside down world.
There's an aspect of our society that is trying to be nice and empathetic that changes language around disorders, abnormalities, anything that is an aberration from the norm or is. We don't want to say that that's we don't want to put a moral category on this. This is, we don't want to say that you have a disorder. You're in your own body. You're beautiful as you are, right? You're beautiful as you are. In order to be empathetic or in order to decrease the likelihood of people feeling bad for something that they didn't have any control over, which is kind of a noble sentiment. But when we take that too far, we start to not seeing that a disorder is a disorder because it causes complications with regards to survival, with regards to not needing a bunch of infrastructure, in order to just support yourself. Like with regard to you, it would be a disorder to be hooked up to the medical system for your entire life. Now you can go through and wrestle with that and say, well, I'm different, and I have a bunch of shame in this, and I lost out on opportunities for life, and those that I'm sure you had to do extra work psychologically to shore up yourself and to figure out, how to deal with the hand that you're dealt. But you still you still need that medical intervention in order to go along with the life that's much more better for you. And so it is, it's not something that you can just wish away or try to smooth over by saying it's not a disorder, that it's some sort of you're a special, I guess you could do that. You can say, I'm a very special person. Well,
yeah, you're right. So there was an in between that they started very negatively about associating disorders, in the 80s, it was very negative. It was over negative, I guess you'd call it. If you had a disorder, you were kind of
more of a freak.
More of a freak, yes. And it kind of progressed to kind of in between. So now you need to be accommodated, but we're not going to morally judge your problems, your difficulties.
We're not going to malign your character based on disorder.
Yeah. Okay. We understand you need categories. Now it's going completely the other side. Now it's like going, you're a special individual and you betrayed yourself because you took hormones or something. Yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah. Like I was a magic intersex person I heard this from, again, the trans community, that I should have just sort of embraced my eunuch, being a
unicity,
a eunuch. It's got it's a castrated male. I should have embraced that, because that's how I was supposed to be. Yeah. And instead I went down and grabbed hormones, and they think this is an option I had or something. Like I could just have chosen at the age 12 to say, I don't want any, or at 16, I don't want any of those hormones. Eventually my osteoporosis would catch up to me and my bones would start breaking.
So that's what would have happened had you not gone on puberty. Like your bone structure would have not developed. Yeah.
This is a big category because bone calcification happens during puberty. And it's like this, you have the limited window to get your bones calcified. And after that, it just doesn't happen as just you can't catch up.
Okay.
So any interruption in puberty, immediately they have to x-ray your bones and make sure you're check your calcium level. They did that a lot. And so that's a real issue with puberty. And another thing with puberty is it's 5 specialties. So it's got endocrinology, urology, bone specialists, neurology, and it should be psychiatry, psychology. But so I had to go see all 4 specialists and get evaluated by all 4 specialists. There wasn't just one person in charge. It was because all of these people know a piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not going through puberty, therefore your neurological is not developing. Okay, you're not going through puberty, we got to check your bone density. Okay, you're not going through puberty. The urologist will what about your prostate? Maybe it's not developed. It's not going to be developed properly, and doing all that kind of. So all that has to be checked as I go through puberty. So I had to go through all of these physicians, and I still see around 3 different specialists. I mean, it's a real drag. I have to, they want follow-ups. I have to take blood tests. The whole thing is just medicalizing. It's very time consuming. Yeah. When I go on vacation, I have to go, okay, do I have enough medication? What if I run out of medication? So it's a real life drain. Yeah. And the less you want to deal, unless you have to deal with the medical community, it's better not. Yeah. So I find this just as these bizarre surgeries. I mean, I read one case that Michael Biggs was documenting. This kid was 18 years old. He was Amsterdam. And, they talked about, he didn't have enough penile tissue because it hasn't developed yet. Mm-hmm. So right there, you say to yourself, I say to myself, there was a developmental disorder in this kid. That's what's causing the lack of growth. And therefore, they're psychologically and sociologically immature. They have not gone through change. And then they've put this kid on cross-sex hormones, which has given them some sort of appearance of going through puberty, but they haven't gone through it. And then they did a penile inversion of this poor kid, and he died. He died of sepsis. The kid died at 18 years old of sepsis. And it's like, well, why didn't they just stop it right there? They should have just stopped the whole thing. They should have stopped all of this puberty blocking stuff. I mean, we have enough data from the detransitioners and the other stuff I talked about. Mm-hmm. Why are we still doing this? I don't understand. Why are people still saying, well, the data's not in? I said, how many more Chloe Cloves have to come forward before you finally get it through your head that any sort of pediatric transition just has to be stopped? Mm-hmm. Adult transitions we can discuss.
Okay.
But
so this is a question that I've brought up in this series several times. Either it's child abuse to not transition a so-called trans kid, or it is child abuse to transition a kid. So there's there's those two things.
One or the other.
It's got to be one or the other.
Yes, it can't be something else.
So from your point of view, from your research, from your own life, you land on
you're abusing the child.
Yeah.
If you're transing the child. So if you're transing the child, you're giving him a condition that I lived with for my entire life, a developmental disorder, which affects their cognitive and physical appearances. And you're pressuring them, and even adult, like people like Richie has talked about this, pressuring them into surgeries and other very surgeries that can lead to, as this kid, death, or later down the road, possible dialysis because kidneys can fail. You're committing a human rights violation because there's a human in front of you and you've messed them up. Yeah. And now you're trying to mold them into something that you think they should be. No benefit to the child.
Yeah. So, and that only makes sense. The other argument only makes sense if you say that there was a kid who was trans before They were already
Well,
trans, and we just fulfilled their destiny, right? So there's this thing called a trans kid, a very special thing. And if they
Yes,
don't
it's
get
a
this
trans kid.
lifelong medical regimen that's highly experimental, and it has, and as the data comes out, it has a widening gulf between success and failure.
Yes.
But that only makes sense if there's such thing as a trans kid. So you
Well,
could have been
so let's-
used, or people probably say that you were a trans kid, right? Or use your condition to say that's a trans.
Yeah, I don't know if I was transing into anything other than transing from adolescent to adulthood,
Yeah.
which is actually which is the only transition you need to make. So okay, let's say there is this trans kid. Okay, we found it. We found this. We got e-meters. They say trans. We give them the e-meters. They pop trans. I would still say no, because if you intervene in, let's say, the trans kid, and you give them a developmental disorder, and you cause them not to develop, and then you do surgeries on them at that age, even if they were supposed to be happy, but they like, well, how could that? So now they're supposed to be happy, or they were going to be more miserable. That's not really measurable, because you've already done all this stuff to them.
Yeah.
So they better be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Jazz Jennings has no choice. I mean, I guess they have three choices. They can be happy with it and continue with this narrative that they've grown up in, the only narrative that they ever know. They can say, this was a mistake, and I renounce the whole thing, which a lot of people's lives are going to be ruined if they do that. Their parents, TLC, all these movie producers will be seen as child abusers. And Jazz Jennings would have to say, okay, well, you guys, what you did to me was wrong. And then there's a third option, which is to stop.
Yes.
Euphemistically, just to nope out.
Yeah. I don't, is that still running? Are that show still going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know why it goes on. Yeah. So Jazz would either have two options. Either Jazz is going to pretend still this was a good idea, even though he said, or she said, or they said, I'm just going to use all pronouns at all times. Either Jazz is going to go along with this, or Jazz is going to be very, very miserable, because Jazz, if you look at Jazz right now, Jazz is a bit obese. Jazz has talked about not having any sexual function. Jazz is now supposed to be asexual. They just create another category, I guess. If it's not going on, just create another category. And so Jazz can't have really intimate relationships. So Jazz has lost something, which Jazz doesn't understand what he has lost, because he never experienced that. It's like the lobotomy. The lobotomy person can't explain after the lobotomy what happened. They're just lobotomized.
Yeah.
They're just, okay.
So it's not measurable. So this trans kid, this ideal trans kid, even this kid that was propped up as the trans kid, you are saying doesn't even know what they're missing.
Yes.
And the adults around them can't admit that without accepting, I abused my child. I sterilized my child. I psychologically and physically abused my child. And I did it in public for fame. Like, that's what you would have to actually.
Yeah, you'd have to admit those things.
Yeah.
You'd have to say, well, we put our child through this transition because originally we believed the experts. And then if you pay attention to the series, like in the middle, they start looking very ill. I mean, even the father starts saying, I thought this was going to be better or something. He said something like that. And so I think it's just like sunk costs. They have sunk so much into this child as being this representative of transness that they can't stop. They just got to keep putting more and more money in that.
And that's one thing when it's just one family, but when a state like California goes down this road, And
Peter Pan State,
and their district attorney and their governor, and then the entire school system all gets on board with this thing. How could they be expected to admit that they've basically committed one of the greatest human rights violations of this century, up to and including perhaps that euphemistically called pestilence that we were talking about? And the response to that.
During the pestilence, as you noticed, that they made a whole bunch of horrible decisions, which you may have gone
which
over,
have delayed child development, specifically with the school closures and stuff.
Yes. Because I used to work in actually university for 13 years.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I enjoyed your evergreen episodes. It was so. It was like you
Schadenfreude.
That was like, it wasn't that bad, but it was a small. It's like evergreen scale is around 2 or 3 versus evergreen was like a 10. That's it. So no, they what they do with now, they're just telling everybody they never said that during the pestilence. They're just memory hole it. It's like, no, we never required whatever. Yeah. We never required that stuff. You guys are just making that up. No. Yeah. I know you have recordings of us saying that stuff.
Well, I guess that's the best we can hope for, because I know that the parents, especially the moms who get on board the trans kid train, they are going to have to deal with that one way or another. But the medical establishment, the professionals, the experts will always just be able to say their reputation is going to be damaged. Right, but they'll just go and weasel out of it and say, well, we were just doing the evidence wasn't in, we're just doing the best.
What they're going to do is, I think what they're going to do is they're already reviewing the research. So I think they're going to come out like really happily endorsing a gender affirming care, and then putting like a line or two saying, well, we're pausing puberty blockers until so-and-so date. Yeah. And so they're just dismantle it in this closet while they are pretending like they're not, like everything's okay. Yeah. Well, so they're going kind of drown it in the bathtub in the back without admitting that they did everything wrong. Yeah. And then I think, which is simply,
it's better than this continuing. Yeah.
Yeah. I would accept any sort of end.
Yeah.
I think that unfortunately, if you don't hold people accountable, it may repeat itself in some other way because he seems to keep popping up throughout centuries. And I just, and plus that people will lose complete trust. You go to your medical professional and it's like, okay, is this medication good for me, or is it good for the pharmaceutical industry?
Yes.
Which one is it? Which one? Yeah.
And to be fair, we can't exactly say in every case.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We can't say.
So yeah. What are you working on going forward? What are you up to going forward?
As far as this,
I guess as far as this topic, because you have made videos, you do make videos. So you have made.
Yes, I have made videos.
And you engage in conversations with myself. Buck Angels.
I tried. Buck Angel. Yes. Yeah. Again, I will. As long as my opinions. Those videos took me an awful long time, and and trying to get over the YouTube black, box, shadow banning everybody. Yeah. It's just it's very difficult to even get over the noise. So I will just keep. I've talked to several people in the GC, including, and I'll keep, if my advice and my experience is helpful for people, I will keep speaking up. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do this, just keep, because it took me 2 years to get some sort of, get people to pay attention. It does get a little wearing sometimes because, as you know, you're just attacked from every side.
Is there any resources, for people to learn, the trusted resources for people to disentangle the appropriation of disorders of sexual development from the gender crew, or from that, progress pride flag, they added y'all there? Didn't that feel special? You got your own triangle and a circle right in there.
They've created a flag, a yellow flag with a big 0 on it, which represents how much they care about the people in that flag.
Okay.
It's just a big 0.
Nice. Okay. But it's a purple 0, so it's kind of royal and
I don't know. It's like nationalism. I thought nationalism was a bad thing, and now everybody's nationalists about their sexuality. It's a nationalist identity. To learn about sexual development, it's very difficult because all of the stuff is all the actual evidence has been suppressed by Google, and all the sort of pseudo evidence has been boosted by Google because Google is no longer Google. Google now has official sources, which they tag, whether it's a website, and those get boosted up. And a lot of those just have disinformation in them. The best way of coming at that is to actually, there's the Paradox Institute with that's one good resource. They cover DSD stuff a lot.
Yeah, with Zach Elliott and
Zach Elliott.
Chris.
They're great. They're great. And other things you could do is that's why I mentioned the disorders and the problems that these DSDs cause, like kidney problems and so forth, because that stuff is still out there. You can still find that stuff. Yeah. And I don't like to concentrate on the disorders, the problems, but it's the only thing that people can find. Because if you Google anything from Scientific America, they say it's like XXY is like you add the X to the Y and then you subtract the Y to the X and you come up with this in-between person, which is very, very offensive, but it's very hard to speak over them. So what I do is I say, how could a disorder be a natural occurring occurrence like red hair, which they keep comparing to, yet have all these disorders such as problems with kidneys, problems with hearts, problems with blood pressure, neurological problems, ADHD. How could these two exist simultaneously? Yeah. That's why I want to challenge people on. Yeah, if you want to support people with disorders, then fix the healthcare system, for Christ's sake. My insurance pays $37,000 a year to pay for medication and hormones and all this kind of stuff. And why don't we talk about that? What about diabetes? Without curing diabetes, that's a life-saving thing. So all of these things, I think, all of this stuff is a distraction. To try to distract people from the fact that our governments and government officials, I think that's okay to say on YouTube, are not really doing their job. They're just basically they're just distracting stuff. They're just saying, oh, it's all identity. We don't have to fix the healthcare system because you can just identify into your own problem.
Or identify out of it.
Or identify out of it.
So what do you do beyond this then? Is there like a cool hobby, like your favorite thing?
Cool hobby? I do let's see here. You got your Moog. Got my Moog.
Wow, that's a serious bit of equipment there. That's chunky.
Oh yeah, this is a Eurorack version of a Moog 55, which went on sale for half price, and I picked one up. So these used to be about like $20,000 units, and Behringer make them for under. You can get one under $1,000 now, and have a full Moog. And so I do this kind of stuff. I'd rather do this kind of stuff because it's fun. Versus, trying to battle everybody.
Totally.
In a game where you just lose more friends and make more enemies. But I like to stand up for the truth. So we got to be accurate, or else I can tell you the ramifications down the road for these trans kids is going to be astronomical. I think even gender critical people will be shocked at the problems that they have to endure with and already enduring with. And I feel like I have to be obligated to say something, or else I'm complicit in the confusion.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, thank you so much, James, for reaching out.
Oh, you're
for
very
coming
welcome.
on and
anytime.
Getting me into trouble, and then
I think you'll be fine. You'll be fine. I've settled all my disputes. Everybody's pretty happy now. I'm not going to fight anybody. I've met the individuals, and we get along.
Good.
So it's all good.
Everybody's lovely. Everybody's lovely.
Everybody's lovely.
We get into little spats on the internet. That's all it is.
It's a very difficult area.
Yeah.
You gotta give people a little slack.
Yeah,
This is a very difficult area.
So hopefully you can send me a track so that I can end the episode with, like one of your Moog tracks.
Oh, you want my Moog track?
Hopefully, could you send us one, and then we'll just end with it?
Okay, I'll send you a Moog track for you. Okay.
Okay, here we go. And that'll just be playing, and I'll end the recording.
Oh wow, that was one stuff.